This video is the last in a set of 4 analysis videos that have been re-uploaded to the Neat Intel YouTube channel from a previous channel. Each of these 4 videos was originally produced and posted online from September to November of 2023 inclusive, and each of them has been re-uploaded because I believe they answer at least one major question that I regularly get about the HFGCS. This video, discussing EAMs that were broadcast on November 19th of 2023, can be seen as answering the questions: what is a busy day for the HFGCS? What happens on days when a lot of messages are broadcast? It also discusses, to a better level of depth than the previous videos in this case study series, some other ideas that have been discussed, including possible encryption methods, lining up EAM broadcasts with E6 activity, and more. I believe this video is the best of these 4 and speaks for itself quite fine, so it does not need any more introduction beyond this. If you're new to this channel and the Neat Intel project, I hope you find it informative. It is Sunday, November 19th, 2023, and this video is going to be about the EAMs that were broadcast today. So there were 31 messages broadcast today, which, if you've been following me for a while, you know that's it's on the upper end of things, but it's nothing crazy. And then especially when you look at the actual number of unique messages, there were only 15. Nothing crazy, but there were a few interesting things that happened today. And this isn't usually something I would make a video about, but I figured, there have been so many days where I'm like, I can make a video about this, but it's on its own, it's insufficient. There's a lot of little things that happen today, and I think it's kind of an interesting opportunity to bring this information to the YouTube audience who doesn't, follow along on Twitter and doesn't see everything. Everything I talk about today I already posted on Twitter, so if you guys follow me on there and read all my posts today, don't worry about this video. But for everyone else, you're in for pretty much a recap of my Twitter timeline, so yippee. Right off the bat, the big thing you can probably notice just from looking at the screen, at 16:45, a 216 character message was broadcast, and that has the Juliet Oscar prefix. And these happen sometimes. Usual formatting that I've talked about before, there are these sections where the same character is repeated 4 times, and that seems to split it up into smaller 18 character substrings. So that's pretty usual. The one thing I pointed out that I don't think I've talked about on my YouTube account too much is that if we actually compare it to other messages with that same prefix, we see that it has more in common than just those 4 character repeats. So if we take a look at a 194 character message with the JO prefix that was broadcast actually just yesterday, you'll see there's a few sections where there are characters in common. And this is something I've been interested in. It's the sections that are highlighted in cyan, by the way. And this is something I've been interested in because I felt, wow, if you have this many characters in common, then that's going to suggest that they're not using one-time pads. And I've been fairly high conviction about that recently. But I was doing a little bit of reading of basic, novice introductory level cryptography. I actually found, a text that wasn't unbearable. I've talked about some other texts I've looked into, and within the first 5 pages, they'll have XKCD webcomic. And I really hate that webcomic. And there's a certain person that finds that webcomic funny. I'm sorry if it's you. I just think it's such a sanctimonious and arrogant webcomic because it kind of comes from this false conceit where it's like, oh, I'm this engineer who can't draw well. Isn't that funny that I'm not good at art? You will never see an artist kind of come at it from the opposite angle and be like, haha, I'm not good at engineering. Look at this joke formula I made that doesn't work and doesn't make sense. But then every now and again, there'll be an XKCD that's drawn marginally well. He'll color it a little bit better as if oh, look, the engineer has conquered the arts. Get over yourself. It drives me so nuts. So there's a certain attitude, there's a certain demeanor, and that's why I can't stand that webcomic. So when you see a university text that has an XKCD, and I'm like, oh no, this is this self-important academic. I even remember when I was in university, there were professors and TAs, you would go into either their offices or their old cubicles and have an XKCD. And I was just never mind. I'll just do the reading myself. I'll figure this out on my own. I don't need you. And that helped me become a better student, actually. Anyways, what was I saying? Right, so with cryptography, and you don't even need to read the text, you could just think of this on your own. They can always do a second pass, they can encrypt the message, and then they can just do a second pass to add those characters in as spacers. There's nothing suggesting that, for example, the Papa 7 Lima necessarily was subject to the encryption method, and therefore it suggests to us that that's the same thing in both those messages, and we have a very strong in on decryption. I still think decryption is possible, but now that it's occurred to me that they can just, add that in after the fact, I don't feel like I necessarily have a massive in on the decryption method. But still, that's interesting, and that's something I've noticed before with other long messages. When they have the same prefix, you'll see these additional shared characters characters. So does that mean they're reusing the pads? I still think they're reusing the pads, by the way, regardless of this observation. Or does it just mean they're adding it in afterwards? Anyways, it's interesting. So there you go. That's the 219 character message. By the way, if you guys want to listen to the recordings, I used to put recordings of long messages on the Internet Friend channel. Now I'm going to put them on Neat Intel. So both yesterday's message and today's, the 18th and the 19th, are on Neat Intel. They have pretty boring title cards. I'm actively ripping off another YouTube channel I saw that did well. And I don't feel great about that, but hopefully the videos don't do that well, and then I can just go back to my own format. Like this other channel had like 2,000 views. I'm like, why? Like, it's literally just a picture. It's like the least edited thing possible. It's the audio and a static picture for like 5 minutes. It has like 2,000 views. I'm like, why? So I'm trying it. It doesn't seem to be working. So I'm going to go back to title cards with K-pop girls, and that's it. The other thing we can take a look at today, I mean, there's a few things, but this is just the next of a few things we'll take a look at here. We had a couple of relay stations, and the first we'll take a look at is the fairly obvious difficult. So at 1756, today's call sign bag luck broadcast a message, and difficult diligently broadcast it at 1800, 1830, 1900, 1930. That's something we've talked about before. We see that it's repeated every 30 minutes. And it's repeated for a total of 4 messages. And you may have, if you listened to my rant video that I put out yesterday, you may have heard I have some disagreement with someone because they see something like this and they say, oh, this means it's an entirely predictable thing. This is how it works. It's always around 4 messages. It's every 30 minutes. And I told this person, you know, hold off on that because I've seen exceptions in the past and I'm sure exceptions will come up soon. And sure enough, you can see with Antiquity, that's the other relay station today that we heard, you can see Antiquity had 2 sets of repeats. So at 1936, bag luck broadcast a message, and Antiquity repeated at 1938, 1950, 2020, and 2050. 4 times great, but between 1938 and 1950, there's only 12 minutes. Another interesting thing there, the broadcasts actually start during bag luck repeat or broadcasting it for the first time. I'll get into that for a moment. Because I want to point out the next thing. Antiquity repeat another message a few times. So at 2146, bag luck broadcast a message, and Antiquity broadcast it at 2147, 2150, and 2120. So between 2147 and 2150, there's 13 minutes, not 30, and it also didn't broadcast a 4th time. I checked multiple SDRs. If you're assuming the every half hour, it should have been at 2250, and that didn't happen. Is it possible there was a broadcast at 2250 and I just missed it? That is always possible. I always concede that's possible. But at that time when I know to like expect a broadcast, I have so many SDRs open, and especially when I don't hear anything start, I start jumping from like frequency to frequency, looking for it. I didn't hear anything. Did I miss it? Maybe, but in times like this, it's like, I don't know, because this isn't the first time something like this has happened. So like, there you go. There's no like hard rule about these things having to broadcast a certain amount of times. And if you look through my previous time cards, you're going to end up noticing that. Now, sometimes there are genuine misses. Actually, if you look at the time card video for November 19th, I'm noticing after I uploaded it that I forgot to include the 2220 message, but certainly there was no 2250 message, or the odds seem very unlikely that there was a 2250 message. Okay, so neat. Now, which planes were these? So we know usually these relay stations are E6s. Sometimes it's very obvious because there'll actually be a message that comes online and says, you know, for whatever call sign, and you look up and you will find a plane with that call sign, and it's like, bingo, great, fantastic. Today there were messages for a call sign cyclopedia. Those were broadcast at 1306, 1658, 1716, and 2038 and 2056, so spanned across the day. But there were no messages for call signs with numbers in it. So that means we don't necessarily know what these planes are. However, with difficult, which broadcasts from 1800 through to 1930, there is a bit of a pattern. Planes that broadcast on, you know, the top and the bottom of the hour. Is that how you say that? What's the bottom of the hour? Hold on. What does it mean if someone says the bottom of the hour? When someone refers to the bottom of the hour, that means at 1/2 the hour. Thank you, ChatGPT. Ask ChatGPT everything now. I can't wait to be able to ask Siri stuff like that. I think that's coming in the next iOS. Anyways, so that's something that has been identified, and as much of a character as he is, I will give the credit to that to Kira Lester, who has apparently declared war on me, which, you know, super cool and academic-y, I guess you could say. But yeah, basically in terms of like those time periods, if it's at 30s and zeros, that usually corresponds to a plane that is flying over the Gulf of Mexico. And if we take a look at the ADSB Exchange website, for November 19th, we see no planes or no E6s or E4s over the Gulf of Mexico, but we can see there is probably a plane that had a trajectory over there and just there weren't any good trackers. It didn't turn its transponder off, it didn't disappear, it just, you know, there are antennas and feeders that give this website data, and it just went out of range of what it can currently cover. But you can see there was something that flew into that area and flew out of that area, and if you follow that trajectory, it looks like the E6 with the hex code AE0419, which was using call sign ALID91 today, was probably difficult. Okay, what about antiquity? So antiquity, even though we have, you know, these messages that violate the 30-minute rule and also don't match the timestamp theory, there's also a pattern there. Again, credit to Kira Lester for noticing this, and I will vouch for it because it does seem plausible. There is a little bit of correspondence, you know, the message will be broadcast at these times, and I'll see planes in those areas, and I'll check a few different SDRs, and reception will kind of correspond to this idea, at least in principle. So it seems valid for now, but, you know, I'll keep an eye out for exceptions, just like I found exceptions to this whole like 4 rule. But antiquity, despite the 38 and the 47, you know, 50s and 20s, that would correspond to being over the Pacific Ocean. And if we take a look at ADSB Exchange again, we do see an E6, which is flying over the Pacific Ocean, and that is E6 AE0416, which was using call sign Pansy 10. So that explains antiquity. Now, this is something that I haven't done a great job of documenting usually, but I wanted to start doing it. The 2109, the 2111, and the 2113 messages, this was a very weak signal, and I actually happened to be at my computer and monitoring the SDR at that time. I think I was waiting for the 2120 from antiquity, so that's kind of why I was actively there. And I noticed this was a very weak signal. It was only on 11175. I couldn't pick it up on 8992. I could barely pick it up in Europe. And I checked a few different frequencies like 4724, 8992, 15016. I even checked a few other covert frequencies. It was really just 11175, very weak. So I thought this is probably not coming from the ground station, even though it's using the bad luck call sign that the ground station was using. So what's going on there? It's not very obvious because I don't know what the rules or conditions would be to allow an airborne relay station, whether it's an E6, whatever it is, to use the ground station call sign. This is something we know happens. It's something we've observed before. Don't necessarily, again, like I said, I don't necessarily know what the conditions are for this to occur, but it's something I've noticed before. Like everything I'm talking about today. All of this is stuff I've noticed before. Nothing here is unique. It's just nice to have it all in one day. So the question is like, well, who is this and why are they doing it? At this point, most of the questions that we have about these messages can be answered by it's probably an E6 doing it. So again, we open up ADSB Exchange again. We take a look at the map and we see all the E6s that were up in the air this day. And we say, okay, supposing it's one of you, which is the most likely? And one thing that sticks out to me here is if you just zoom in here, you're going to see this one flight path that has like these loop-de-loops going on. And the timing of these loop-de-loops corresponds to the time the messages went out, 2109, 2111, and 2113. And this makes it plausible for me to say, oh, I wonder if this E6 was acting as bad luck. But it almost doesn't make a lot of sense because if we zoom out again, this is the play that I already earlier said with a decent degree of conviction that was difficult because we know it followed the the standard, if we'd like to call it that, 30-minute thing. It was broadcasting at the top and bottom of the hour over the Gulf of Mexico, probably. So we've identified that it was using the call sign difficult. So why on earth was it able to, 2 hours later, approximately, change its call sign to the ground station? What precipitated that? And also, why is it doing that? Like, who is that for? When these messages are broadcast over the ocean, we assume broadcasting to a a submarine, or at least pretending to broadcast to a submarine? In this case, what is it broadcasting to? There is a possible answer, and I might look into this, but there's something called North Star. I don't know anything about it, but I've seen people mentioning it here and there. And sometimes when planes fly in loops, it apparently corresponds to connecting to the North Star system. Here, I don't know where the nearest North Star system is, but this is the next thing I'm going to take a look at. The closest I found so far is I found like a military Department of Defense like procurement solicitation for something to do with North Star and some kind of convoluted like satellite communication system, something or other. So North Star is real, and apparently sometimes you will see planes fly in circles and broadcast messages because they're connected to North Star. I'm paraphrasing there. But is it fair for me to say this E6 changed its call sign several times during the day, and now it's using this call sign, and now it's using that call sign? Not terrifically sure. I do know at some point I heard difficult checkout of the net, but I didn't bother to make a note of it because I hear those so often during the day, and I was like, okay, like it's just checking out. But now I really wish I did, because it would be interesting to know when did difficult check out, because if it checked out before it did these loopy loops, that would give us a little bit of insight. I may look into that. Maybe I'll do a follow-up video. As I'm editing this video, it occurred to me to check HF Underground, so thank you to Sigint for noting the time the difficult checked out, and if you read the text on the bottom there, it becomes a little bit difficult to suggest that it's that same plane. Part of it is just because it gets so confusing to track these call signs. I made a few posts today about exactly what you're listening to me talk about today on Twitter, and I had to delete the post and put it back up over and over because I kept mixing up the hex codes here. And it's like my fault entirely. I'm not going to pretend, oh, the website's glitching out on me. I will occasionally click a plane, be like, this is the plane I want, diligently like copy and paste the hex code rather than typing it out from memory, because I know I keep making this mistake, and say this is the plane I want to talk about, and then like I'll go back and like either click another plane or something or whatever it is and realize, oh, I was focused on the wrong plane, I've copied the wrong hex code, and I get all mixed up. And certainly on a day like today where, you know, I'm keeping track of difficult and antiquity and bad luck, which is now apparently possibly a plane, and trying to like reconcile which one is which call sign, I get flustered, which is why I continue to tell my audience both on Twitter and on here, I don't have a lot of conviction with the plane stuff, but obviously it's for a while been fairly obvious that if, you know, we want to figure out or conclude certain things, we need to take a look at the flight stuff. So whenever I say anything with planes or hex codes, please continue to take it with a grain of salt. Not like the idea at whole, like the conclusions I'm making are reasonable, but do please bear in mind human error is still possible at this stage for me because I'm still getting used to tracking these planes and figuring out what's going on. It's funny because someone got irritated with me and said, you know, why have you said hex code ADFEB6 is a Mercury E6? And he asked that because it's an E4. And it's like, you know, fair enough, my friend. But then he got mad at me for saying, man, I was just looking for posts and updates tied to hex codes and came across this stuff. Sorry, but it doesn't seem like you have any idea what you were writing about. Loopy loop, come on. And basically, because he dared to criticize me, I wrote an angry reply and I blocked him, and I made a declaration of war in his YouTube comments. No, I'm kidding. I'm not that petty. I kind of gave it to him, you know. Obviously he's skimming my post, but it's a long post, so it's not super his fault. But no, again, like I don't have a lot of conviction with this stuff sometimes. Still a work in progress. But at least, you know, in the larger scheme, when it comes to monitoring the HFGCS and so on, I feel like I've got a pretty good track record on that. So yeah, that's pretty much what we observed today. And again, you know, cool, great, 31 messages went out. But when you look at so many of them being repeats, instead of just getting hyped about the number, let's take a look at the actual quality of the messages and see if we can't figure something out together, and I think we have. So that's my contributions to the conversation, and then if you guys notice anything yourselves, feel free to reach out in the comments. And other than that, this is Internet Friend, and thank you for watching. Goodbye. Thank you for listening. This is basically a podcast. Thank you for listening. The next video will be about TikTok and Scott Pilgrim. And because this channel is demonetized, this video is brought to you today by its sponsors. Over on Patreon, we have Paul R. Procos, TJ Ship, Chris K. and Espresso, and no less valuable over on Buy Me a Coffee, Dat Silencer, Kinky Contango, Shane the Ninja, and I Doubt We've Met.
Thank you very much, guys. This video literally would not go up without you, so you are keeping the project going. Thank you very much. Oh, and also Rick. I just noticed Rick joined on the Patreon yesterday, so thank you very much, Rick, for joining. And if you are watching this video and you enjoy the content or appreciate what I'm doing, and you're able to, please don't give if you can't. Links to my Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee are on the screen right there. Thank you very much. I think I've said thank you very much already. This is the end of the video now. Goodbye. Thank you.